Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Syrian forces kill 16 civilians as ambush claims the lives of 5 security personnel. Obama's UN speech outrages Palestinians in Ramallah. And French court finds 2 women defying the ban on the Niqab. Mosaic, world news from the Middle East, begins now.
The civilian death toll in Syria is rising as 5 security force members were killed in an armed ambush, while the army is continuing its security operations in a number of areas.
The death toll in Syria rises every morning with the sun. According to the Syrian Revolution General Commission, at least 16 people were killed in the past 24 hours, most of them in Homs, as the arrest and raid campaign continues. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights confirmed the arrest of lawyer Imad Drubi at the Palace of Justice in Homs. In addition, news of the arrest of television writer, Syrian Kurdish artist Muhammad Omar Oso, and his cousin was circulated on Facebook. They were arrested in the capital's Ruknuddin neighborhood. As activists renewed the call to protest tomorrow under the slogan, Friday for the Opposition's Unity, the local coordination committees condemned the army's surrounding of Bab Umru and Homs, confirming that an atmosphere of terror dominates the neighborhood as the search and arrest campaign continues. On the other side, Syrian TV reported the death of 5 security force members and the injury of 18 others in an armed ambush set up by an armed terrorist group. They targeted a military bus on a Tiba-Jiza highway in Daraa province. Syrian TV announced that security agencies caught a terrorist group in the neighborhood of Asit in Daraa and seized their explosive devices. Daraa's specialized units managed to dismantle a homemade explosive device weighing about 4 kilograms. It was found in the garden of a house. As the U.S. has rejected granting the head of the Central Bank of Syria, Adib Mayalleh, a visa to participate in a meeting in Washington held by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, American Ambassador to Damascus, Robert Ford, warned of sectarian strife if the regime continues to crack down on civilians. He stressed the Syrian army is still holding on despite the defections. In an analysis of the events, diplomats confirmed to Agence France-Presse that protests have lost momentum in Syria, but that dissenters could resort to violence since their peaceful protests were not effective in confronting a harsh regime. According to the head of the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, Rami Abdulrahman, the decline in the size of protests is due to widespread arrests, especially among the organizers of the movement, and the systematic encirclement of villages. As for the spokesman of the local coordination committees of Syria, Omar Idilbi, he confirmed that protests have not decreased, but were reduced during one day in the areas witnessing a violent crackdown, while protests were moved to other areas. Expert on Syrian affairs Thomas Pierre said the Syrian opposition will not be able to bring about the end of the regime peacefully. He added that we are now probably in a second phase, a war of attrition.
Our Al Jazeera correspondent in Yemen reported that consecutive explosions were heard in the capital Sana'a in heavy artillery shelling operations against supporters of Sheikh al-Ahmar carried out by Saleh's forces. He said 6 people were killed today and 14 others were wounded by snipers in Change Square.
9 people were killed yesterday and dozens were injured by snipers' gunfire and artillery shells in clashes between pro- and anti-regime forces.
Our correspondent in Sana'a, Ahmed Shalafi, follows the latest developments in Yemen.
More killing is taking place amid a suffocating political deadlock. This is the situation in Yemen, a day after Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Abdul Latif al-Zayani, left Sana'a empty-handed. His efforts failed to bring President Ali Abdullah Saleh's regime and the opposition to sign the Gulf Initiative. The revolutionaries reject the initiative, claiming that it provides a legal cover for Saleh, his family members, and high government officials to escape prosecution on the crimes committed against the revolutionaries. Yemeni sources spoke of renewed clashes in Sana'a between the forces loyal to Saleh and the forces led by Major General Ali Mohsen al-Ahmar. The sources also indicated that the revolutionaries in Change Square continue to be subjected to the gunfire of snipers, and that more victims fell. Approximately 100 people have been killed in Sana'a since Saleh's forces began their attack on revolutionaries this past Sunday, while hundreds more have been wounded. The killing in Sana'a did not prevent the revolutionaries from continuing their protests, demanding the downfall of Saleh, which began this past February. Saleh's loyalist forces blocked the roads that connect Sana'a with other provinces and banned any entry into the capital, allowing people only to exit. However, the revolutionaries say these measures did not reduce the momentum of the protesters in Sana'a or other regions. Here in the city of Al-Mukalla, a massive demonstration occurred during which protesters chanted slogans vowing to continue the revolutionary escalation until realizing their dream of freedom and ridding the country of tyranny and corruption. This dream comes with the condemnation of certain Gulf countries that protesters believe are undermining the revolution's victory and attempting to provide an escape for the faltering regime. The city of Aden witnessed similar protests Wednesday afternoon. These protests reflect the pains of South Yemen and depict the Yemeni tragedy caused by decades of attrition and exacerbated by internal conflicts, wars, political turbulence, and poor economic conditions. As the Yemeni scene continues, the revolutionaries insist on bringing Saleh and his aides to justice, vowing to continue the revolution no matter how long it takes, especially considering that the bloodshed rules out any chance for initiatives or debates.
Hundreds of Palestinians staged a protest rally in the West Bank city of Ramallah, condemning U.S. President Barack Obama's speech before the UN General Assembly on the recognition of the State of Palestine. The Palestinians said that Obama had surpassed all U.S. presidents in favoring the Israeli occupation entity.
The Palestinians tuned in to Obama's speech, knowing that he would break his promises. In Tel Aviv, the speech received a warm welcome. In his speech before the UN, Obama has reversed his slogans announced in Cairo upon ascending to power. He failed to mention the settlements or the Palestinian state borders. Instead, he portrayed Tel Aviv as a peaceful entity surrounded by enemies. According to some Palestinians in his speech, Obama surpassed all of his predecessors in favoring Tel Aviv.
The true face of the U.S., its policy, and its presidents has always been known to us. So this speech was not a disappointment to the Palestinians.
Not far from the memorial of Yasser Arafat, hundreds of Palestinians staged an angry rally denouncing Obama's speech before the UN. After Obama's speech, anti-U.S. sentiment grew in the Palestinian street, spreading from the majority of Palestinians to the entire population, including those who were quietly betting on a U.S. role in the peace process.
We as a teachers' union, along with other guilds, strongly reject Obama's speech. It was a bad speech for the Palestinians.
The Palestinians have sent a message to the Arab nations, which reads, "In light of the Islamic awakening, on Friday, Arab squares are to be turned into fronts against the U.S. policy in the region."
We plead to the Arab and Islamic public and the free world to say no to U.S. arrogance and double-standard policies, and no to Obama's political hypocrisy. God willing, we will continue pushing ahead, along with our political leadership, until we achieve our dream of establishing our independent Palestinian state, with Jerusalem as its capital.
Anyone expecting honey from Obama has received poison instead. Obama pulled off the mask and exposed the ugly face of the U.S. administration. He did not equate the victim and the executor. Instead, he brought relief to the executor and heinously opened fire at the victim. This is the change that Obama talked about in Cairo upon ascending to power. Faris Arafandi al-Allam occupied Ramallah.
The Hamas movement said that U.S. President Barack Obama's speech before the UN reflects Washington's complete bias toward the Israeli occupation entity. Hamas spokesman Sami Abu Zuhri called for the adoption of a national Palestinian strategy based on self-reliance and on Arab and Muslim roots. Abu Zuhri also called on the Arab and Islamic people to mount pressure on their rulers to reduce the U.S. role in the region due to their hostile policy against the Palestinian and Arab interests and due to their absolute support of the Israeli occupation. Dozens of pro-Palestinian political activists held a protest rally in front of the British government headquarters in the capital, London. The protesters expressed support for UN recognition of the State of Palestine. In a message submitted to British Prime Minister David Cameron, activists called on the British government to vote in favor of recognizing the Palestinian state and described London's position as confusing. In addition, activists said that the time has come for the Palestinians to launch their bid following 20 years of Israeli procrastination and unproductive talks. On the other side of the street, several supporters of the Israeli entity demonstrated against the bid.
Returning now to events unfolding at the United Nations, and I am joined in the studio now by Ambassador Jorm Ettinger. Ambassador Ettinger, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, much of President Obama's speech last night dealt with the Israeli-Palestinian stalled peace process. A lot of people say this was a very pro-Israel speech given by a very good friend of Israel's. Is that a fair assessment?
I suggest to note the colloquialism of the lesson that leopards never change spots. They do, however, change tactics. In my assessment, President Obama's speech at the UN reaffirmed his worldview on global affairs in general, the Palestinian issue in particular, global affairs, which was the bulk of the speech. He reiterated his assessment that events in Libya and Egypt and Iraq and Syria and Yemen, etc., are march of democracy and transition to democracy in Libya, where in fact we have Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, etc. He was calling once again for engagement with Iran, sanctions on Iran, which plays into the hands of Iran, and on and on. When it comes to the Palestinian issue, once again he said that this is the test of American policy, namely adhering to his own belief that the Palestinian issue is the root cause of the malaise in the Middle East and beyond. He specifically mentioned that the refugees of 1948 will have to be on the table, as will have to be a case of Jerusalem. And maybe most concerning in my mind has been the moral equivalence. It's the Palestinians have grudges and Israel has grudges, namely Palestinian terrorism is lumped together with Israel's war on defense. It's not enough to talk the talk. What behooves President Obama to prove the newly created image of Obama by walking the walk.
Some have said that this speech will alienate the Obama administration, the president, from his friends in the Arab world. Do you think if that happens, Israel's going to have a price to pay somewhere down the line with regard to the White House?
Well, it depends on Israel. And the first thing to note is that Obama did not do a favor to Israel. Obama was acting as a follow-up to a public opinion poll which was published on Capitol Hill's newspaper, The Hill, on September 15th, which showed rising support for Israel, transcending religious and political lines, especially among the independents, who are the most critical bloc of voters in America. It was right after the New York 9th District election, where the Democrats were defeated for the first time after 9 years because of Obama, among other things, his attitude towards Israel. He's not doing a favor to Israel, and Israel should not reciprocate, because he was addressing voters in America rather than world audience.
Libya's interim rulers say today they had further consolidated their control over Sahara desert town that has been among Muammar Gaddafi's last strongholds, and said Gaddafi himself was running out of places to hide. But a spokesman for the fugitive Libyan leader said that forces with the new government had killed over 100 people while trying to capture Sirte, though there was no independent confirmation of this. Libya's National Transitional Council, NTC, the country's de facto government after Gaddafi was swept from the capital last month, is anxious to show that it is establishing military control over the country and can govern Libya effectively. Progress has been slow in the seizing the towns of Sirte and Bani Walid, with military inaptitude hampering the advance until now. Some of the parts of Sabha, the traditional base for Gaddafi's own tribe about 800 kilometers south of Tripoli, had been occupied by fighters loyal to him.
Our correspondent in Tripoli has been looking to see how young people have been helping out the revolutionaries in their fight against Muammar Gaddafi.
Meet Abdul Malik, one of Libya's child soldiers. He's 16 years old and says he's ready to fight and die for the revolution. Instead, however, he's stuck here, manning a checkpoint outside Tripoli. Isn't he a bit young to be carrying a gun?
In Libya, the children have to know how to use a gun. Gaddafi left us no choice.
Being too young, however, Ahmed won't be allowed to join his brother and cousin at the front line for years. His mother, no doubt, will be hoping the war is long finished by then. For those not so keen on playing soldiers, there are plenty of other ways to help out. All across Libya, groups of young people can be seen cleaning the streets. Gaddafi ruled Libya for 41 years. For young people, living under his dictatorship is all they've ever known. Graffiti is everywhere in Tripoli, mostly created by the young. There's a common theme. Most nights, Osama comes out to paint the town red, black and green. He tells me that he feels like he's helping to support the revolutionaries the best way he can. Do you think it's important for the people of Tripoli to see paintings like this?
All the people, they come and support and encourage me.
Even the younger ones do their bit to help. At an event held to honor the families of martyrs, usually young men who have lost their lives on the front lines, the kids provide the entertainment.
Even below 12 years old, they support the fighter by saying Allahu Akbar. And Allahu Akbar means many things for us as a fighter, because they give support to the fighter against Gaddafi, okay? And does
it give them strength?
Yeah, they give him this. Yeah, that's right.
Many revolutionaries say that they are fighting for the future and fighting for the young. The kids, however, are playing their part too. Johnny Miller, Press TV, Tripoli.
Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has slammed world powers for infringing on the rights of other nations. In his speech before the UN General Assembly in New York, Ahmadinejad also criticized the current structure of the United Nations.
These powers seek their progress, prosperity and dignity through the poverty, humiliation and annihilation of others. They consider themselves superior to others, enjoying special privileges or concessions. They have no respect for others and easily violate the rights of all nations and governments. The United Nations was created to make possible effective participation of all nations in international decision-making processes. We all know that this goal has not yet been fulfilled because of the absence of justice in the current management structures and mechanisms of the United Nations.
Well, Ahmadinejad said human values such as peace, justice, and freedom cannot be achieved through military intervention. He also criticized the U.S. for killing Osama bin Laden instead of trying to shed more light on September 11th attacks in New York and Washington. Elsewhere in his remarks, Ahmadinejad said people around the world have now been awakened and no longer bow to oppression. Diplomats from the U.S. and a number of other Western countries have walked out of the UN General Assembly as Iran's president was delivering his speech. American diplomats left the chamber immediately after President Ahmadinejad criticized Washington for using the 9/11 attacks as a pretext to attack Iraq and Afghanistan. A number of other delegations from Western countries, including France and Canada, left the session after the Iranian president questioned certain European countries' abuse of the Holocaust to violate other nations' rights. Meanwhile, multiple sources have said the walkout was a coordinated move.
The French judicial court issued a verdict to fine 2 women for wearing the niqab, enforcing the law that bans wearing the niqab in public, which was passed last April.
Ever since the French Parliament passed the law that bans wearing the niqab in public, controversy arises every so often. While some see the law as supporting the country's secular principle, others believe it is a violation of personal freedom. Today, the French judiciary issued the first verdict to fine 2 women for violating the law. One of the 2 women, Hind Ahmas, did not show discontent with the verdict, but instead considered it a sufficient cause to escalate the case.
I'm extremely satisfied because we will finally be able to take the necessary steps to refer the case to the European Court of Human Rights and obtain a verdict that invalidates this law.
Among the women who supported Hind was Kenza Drider, who began a presidential campaign for the 2012 election.
I decided to perform my duty, and I hope all French women will support my candidacy for the presidential election because I aspire to serve all women who are suffering from political, economic, or social discrimination.
The ban on niqabs only affects about 2,000 women in the country that houses the largest Muslim community in Europe, with a Muslim population of 5 million. French President Nicolas Sarkozy described the niqab as a prison for women. Some human rights activists accused him of targeting one of the most fragile social components of France in order to gain support from the extreme right wing that has a strong presence in the French political scene in preparation for next year's electoral battle. Salih Nabil, BBC.
In order to promote the culture of dialogue and acceptance of different opinions, the first conference for religious dialogue in a modern civil society was opened with participation from intellectuals and religious scholars.
The spotlight is focused on common values, which unites all heavenly religions under its flag in order to bridge the differences and avoid division among the people of the same nation. This is the goal of the Council of Dialogue and International Relations First Conference, organized by the Evangelical Church with participation from a group of Islamic and Christian religious scholars.
Many hands behind the scene are trying to destroy the country's future. Therefore, we believe it is necessary for everyone to stand side by side in unity to fend off any attempt to inflict damage, whether from inside or outside the country.
This includes the exchange of ideas and opinions on shared principles among people of various cultures, religions, or sects. That is absolutely not a problem, because just like the Holy Quran says, we have the right to differ. Our Lord created a diverse world, and in order for all different people to coexist, dialogue is necessary.
Everyone agreed that dialogue, respect for human rights, and acceptance of others despite their differences are the main foundation for building a modern civil state.
It's very important during this turbulence and storm in Egypt that we focus on common grounds and hold dialogue over our disputes.
We agreed on 99% of the points because whatever happens to me may happen to others. What everyone agrees on is that we all want our country to be better and our economy to develop. We also want to put an end to the protests, fighting, sit-ins, and strikes which are weakening the economy.
So the love that Christianity calls for with its saying, God is love, and the mercy that Islam calls for with God's sacred words, we sent thee but as a mercy to the worlds, present a common ground for the beginning of a constructive dialogue to build a society in which we live and work towards Egypt's development and progress. Lamia Miwafi, Nile TV.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.